Hello everybody and welcome back to my progress series, 1 year of drawing. This past week I spent a lot of time with shading, both just my regular doodles as well as the shapes that you see here on the screen. So the first one that I worked on was the sphere up here in the top corner. The cool thing about spheres is that you can only tell if it's a sphere depending on the shading. Otherwise it would just be a circle. And so I kind of drew it as the light was shining down on this part here, with it getting darker around the back as you curve around the back side of the sphere. From there I moved on to this cube. It's kind of hard to see on this one, the shading, I didn't make it dark enough. There's just one tone of shading along this side. I was imagining it as the light source was in front of the cube, shining mostly on the front face. Since it's around the side, it wouldn't be receiving as much light, but since it is kind of in the same area, it would be receiving some light as like being reflected off of other things around it. So I tried not to go super dark with it because I knew that it wouldn't be as dark as like the complete other opposite side, the opposite face of this front face here. So I tried to do like an in-between, but I guess I should have gone a little more dark with this side here. The next one that I worked on was the cylinder. I kind of drew it as from a more extreme angle or a more extreme perspective, where you can imagine this as like a skyscraper almost, and you're about 3/4 of the way up on the skyscraper, kind of looking directly at it. So it's going to appear very large at the top, but the top of the cylinder is still going to curve upwards, and then it's going to get much smaller down towards the base. So that's how I was imagining this one as I was drawing it. Maybe you're like flying or floating over a city, and you're looking at the buildings, and this is almost how it would appear flying past it. I was imagining the light source as being in front of it and a little to the left, so most of the direct lighting would hit on this part here, and then as it went around the back side of the cylinder, it would get darker and darker. This next one here to the side is a triangular prism. I was trying to imagine two different light sources on this one, both of different intensities. So this one here was a little more intense than this light here. And so you can see that this side here, where this light source is closer, is lighter than this side over here that's receiving more direct light from this source. And then the source here on the front would be receiving the least out of either of these, and so it's much darker. I was also trying to imagine these light sources as in a 3-dimensional space, where this one is closer to this bottom corner here on the side, and this one is more in the middle of this face, kind of directly out from it. And so that would cast a shadow on this side. If it was just this light source here, then the shadow would extend beyond this side, but since this light source is here, it kind of eliminates the shadow that would extend beyond this point, and so the shadow would end here, with the darkest section of it being in this area here. So this one turned out pretty well. I like this one. Moving on from there, while I was drawing this one, it was meant to be a triangular prism, but I kind of forgot that, like, unless you view it from directly from an angle where you can see the base, that it would just kind of look like a regular rectangular prism. So when I was drawing it, the third side of the triangular base ran along the back here, but since I'm viewing it from this angle in front, you can't really see it, and so it just appears to be a rectangular prism. So that was a thing that I learned after I drew it, which was kind of interesting, you know, just how it turned out. I was imagining a light source to the front left, kind of in an area here, where it's a little closer to us than the prism is. So this side here would be receiving a lot of light, this side would be receiving much less, and then the shadow would extend behind the prism towards the back here. Since it is supposed to be a triangular prism, I cut the shadow off a little early If it was a rectangular prism, then the shadow would extend into this section here and continue on behind it. But since the light source is off to the left in front of it here, and there's not a fourth side to this prism, or a fourth face, that light is going to reach back behind it and kind of cut off the shadow, and so it creates more of a triangular shadow like this. After that, I drew this little cube here. I imagine my light source here kind of shining on the back side of it. So this side here is going to receive quite a bit of light from the source. This side here is it's a little too close to us, a little closer to us than this light source, so it's not going to receive as much light, but I was thinking that it would receive some from like other objects in the room, reflecting light back on it. So I drew it a little lighter than this side back here, which would be receiving the least amount of light from the source here, and then the shadow kind of extends this way. Next, I drew this cone with a light source kind of to the front and to the right on this side. So the direct line of light is kind of along this side here. I think I messed up on a lot of the shading on these cylinders, because if your light source is like circular, then there's going to be a more circular section of your object that's going to be receiving the most light. It's not going to be like this band here, like what I was imagining at first. And so that's something that I'm going to have to look into and research and try to improve upon for next week. As we wrap around this cone, this back side here is going to receive the least amount of light since our light source is in the front. So it's going to get much darker along the back here. As we wrap around the side of the cone, the back side is going to receive a lot less, so it's going to be much darker than the front of it because our light source is out in the front. Next, I have another cylinder, and I try to use a drop shadow method on this one to try to get a more accurate shadow casted from it instead of just guessing. So I imagine my light source is being behind it and a little to the right. So the top is going to receive quite a bit of light. It's a little lighter. The back side here is going to be the most dark. And then as you wrap around the cylinder, it's going to get a little lighter. And then with the drop shadow method, you draw a line straight down from your source, hitting the ground, the same level that your object is sitting on. And then you use straight lines from that source to the very outermost edge of your object. And for this case, since it's a cylinder, this is a straight line here. So the outermost part is going to be the same throughout this entire object. Let's say this was like a totem pole that had like wings extended from like a face at this part. And so you'd have to do the line over to the side to account for that wing that's coming outwards. Don't have to do that in this case. Just go straight down to this bottom corner and then it extends this way. So that outlines your outermost edges of your circle. And then within that, I kind of tried to do an umbra and a penumbra, since all shadows have two main parts to it, which is like a lighter part and a darker part, depending on like the size of your light source. So that was kind of a cool thing to play around with. Not sure how super accurate I am with that. I believe the darker section needs to come out a little farther since my light source is a little smaller. If it was bigger, then the darker part would kind of cut in more, but that's something I'm going to have to play around with. And then to finish it up, I drew this last one. This one turned out a little weird. I was thinking of like a unique perspective that I haven't really worked a lot with, but nevertheless, I can still use it as like shading and stuff, so I kept it. I imagine my light source is being directly above it in the middle of the object, so the entire upper part of this cylinder is going to be a little lighter, with it getting darker along the bottom, and especially these outer sides, or the outer faces. And then once again I did a drop shadow method, but I found it a little more difficult with the cylinder facing like this and with the light source in the same spot, or with the light source in this spot. Since the light source is in the middle of the object, when you drop it down, you can't take it to the outer edge since it's already in the center of the object. So what I tried to do was I dropped these sides down here and imagine where they would intersect with the plane that this object is sitting on, which ran along this kind of line here. And then I use that as my drop shadow, extending my drop point out to those outer edges to get where my shadow kind of ends on the end here. And then I filled it in because there is going to be a shadow here since it's directly above it, and the sides of the cylinder kind of extend beyond where the drop point is. So I kind of had to improvise with this one. I think it turned out pretty decent. You can't really see it very well, the shadow along the backside. Um, but again, that's something I'm going to have to work on with getting my shadows looking good and that kind of thing. Overall, I was pretty satisfied with this week's work. Um, I mean, it's still nothing too crazy, uh, but it's nothing super easy either. It takes a lot of three-dimensional visualization, which is something that I feel like I've always been pretty good at with imagining objects and what they look like without actually seeing it or having it like in my hands or hands-on that I can look at and study in person. But I'm gonna have to keep working on actually creating it from what I imagine within my head. So that'll be interesting. We'll have to see where it goes. I'm gonna keep working on it throughout this week and maybe even all of next week too. Hopefully next week I can bring you guys a little spicier of a outro. This week I don't have a time lapse to finish up on. My drawing tablet kind of quit out on me. It still kind of works, but it's not responding as well as it used to. It just kind of like parts of the tablet have quit working. I have a new one, a new graphics display coming in the mail tomorrow by Kirion. I'm really excited, looking forward to it. So hopefully next week I can get you guys a really spicy outro. But nevertheless, thanks for watching. If you'd like to, go ahead and subscribe so you can follow along with the series, see where it goes, see how I progress. Leave any comments down below if you think there's anything that I can do better, anything that you think I should change. Again, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.